All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to Email. No, seriously, Email with Dr. Jason Neiffer.
Well, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Jason Neiffer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana State Virtual School located on the beautiful University of Montana campus. Picture behind me in Missoula, Montana, in beautiful Western Montana. And thank you for coming to a session that was actually called email. And I'm sure you're probably wondering to yourself, how will we possibly make the topic of email exciting? But I'm hoping to give you some insights today on how to better manage email in your world. And before we get started, I did create a Wakelet. Wakelet is what the cool kids make today for our session today. And I've a short link to that. It's mtda.link/22q up email, 22q up email. And there you will find several pieces of information, including all the links I'm sharing today, including links to some tools that I use to manage my email, a copy of these slides in case it would be interesting for you to access that later, and also all the articles I refer to in our session today. We're also going to be spending a little bit of quality time today in Jamboard, because Jamboard is super fun, and I'm also curious to get your insights on some things related to email as well. So again, the Wakelet is at mtda.link/22q up email, and then thank you for putting the link in chat to help out folks. So before we get started, I also have a Jamboard link that's also available at a short link. If you will go there now, mtda.link/QUpJam, which sounds super exciting. QUpJam is where we will be jamboarding together today. And I do have two questions before we get started on the content for today. If you haven't been in Jamboard before, it's a pretty exciting tool. You can navigate by going back and forth on the top part of it. I made you all editors automatically so you can add things to the Jamboard, but the way you answer questions is by clicking on a sticky note, and then you can type whatever you like here to kind of collaborate on this space. So question number one for today is, based on your experiences, and I imagine many of you have been doing email for decades now, what do you like about email? And I'll pause for a moment, stick some sticky notes up. What is it that you enjoy about email? And I'll go ahead and help organize these on the screen. So early responses include asynchronous access, a paper trail, and documentation. We'll talk about that later. A pause before replying. Sounds like many of you may already be super email people. You can hit send. You can be sent and read anytime. That asynchronicity is awesome. Quick communication. It's easy. It provides a good paper trail. Allows you to make notes for documentation for yourself. You can choose how long you respond before answering back. Again, seems like a lot of awesome email people in the crowd today. Easy to contact anyone. When in writing, people cannot deny your response. That's also wonderful and true, and also sticks things to you as well. Great point. Can provide detailed information in an email. Very true. And then, of course, since I am presenting the argument today that email has some ugh to it, or at least there's a perception with ugh to it, then flip to the next screen. What do you hate about email? What is challenging for you, or perhaps for others that you know, in regards to email? The overwhelming nature of it, overwhelming. I see a theme emerging. I see volume and chat. That's so true. I can control which conversations I'm not included in. Here. It's an intimidating presence on your phone. Ain't that the truth? The lack of tone. Yep. Students don't seem to be very excited about email, which is a challenge. That's also true. Spam is gross. People don't answer emails. Tone can be misunderstood. It can lack in key information. In chat, it takes away from the human element or face-to-face communication. That is also true. People expect immediate response, including people that don't do immediate responses themselves. Everyone's signature is taking up too much space. Well, I'm probably going to show you my too big signature today as well. People that split up conversations and then everything's a separate email and it turns into a huge mess. That's also very true. And when you're writing, you can't tell the emotion behind the message. That is also true as well. Well, thank you for indulging me, everyone. I think this is, oh, and then the infamous reply all, yeah. Or people add in a bunch of people in the reply, and then it turns into an epic conversation that was unintended. Well, thank you for indulgence, everyone. I thought we'd start there to maybe ground us in these basics, and then let me get into now kind of my formal presentation to start with. Now, for those who've heard me present before, I always love giving a context because I think when you're spending 45 minutes with someone to kind of walk through a perspective, why is it that I'm talking about email and why is it that I care about email so much personally? And I'll tell you, the big picture for me is that I think the basics are so important, especially when you're talking about distance and online learning, that sometimes we focus on the deeper issues before mastering the basics. And I have 12 years of experience now. In fact, it's almost 13 in a couple of months working in a distance learning environment as an administrator and curriculum director. And as it turns out, I've seen dozens, if not hundreds of instances where well-meaning programs, well-meaning interactions, well-meaning one-on-one interactions have been essentially blown up because email caused an issue that was either hard to repair or impossible to repair. And for me, I think we can only start to do the more nuanced work in distance learning if and only if we're all working together to pull on the same oar to master the basics. And for me, in 2022, despite email's rumored death, email is still an incredibly important basic. So let me give you a couple context on this. You don't need to go very far to find out what people think about email. There's plenty of evidence on the internet that people hate email. Articles like this, 38% of people are considering losing or I'm sorry, quitting their job because of email fatigue. Now, of course, this article makes me laugh because this article was from April 21st, 2021. And my guess is the worst thing on your plate as a distance worker, and I'm assuming that's who we're mostly talking about here, was probably not email, but the move online, online everything during the pandemic has forced us to restart using some tools that perhaps we've either forgotten or wish we had forgotten. And the fact that 1/3 of workers were thinking about leaving their job because email was so terrible at least tells you that there's some disgust of the platform. But you can go a little deeper than this. People have been guessing and prognosticating that email is dying on the vine and that will soon be gone. And you don't have to go very far to find articles. Here's 3 new pieces of proof the email is dying from Inc. magazine. 5 reasons why email will become outdated as a form of communication because it's the death of email. This is from 2019. I love quoting John Dvorak, who is a 40-year journalist in technology, because he's been talking about how email will soon be dead for literally 25 years, going back into the 1990s. And here's a recent article, although not that recent. He says it's dying again. This was 7 years ago. Obviously, a lot of people are guessing that email is just so terrible that it's soon to leave the tool set that we utilize to connect with each other. Also, email is really the blame for everything bad. You don't have to go very far to find that information on the internet either. Communication technology is killing our productivity. A study of 50,000 workers says that they can't go 6 minutes without checking their email or IM, although that one does include IM. And I think that's something that it's need to be thoughtful about, right? That idea of productivity, the 3 biggest ways email's killing your productivity and how to solve them. Our research shows that most workers can't go 6 minutes without checking their email or checking their IMs. And I want to present a counterpoint to you because if you've worked in a largely distance learning organization or a distance learning employer over the last couple of years, you probably have an awful lot of Zoom meetings. And as it turns out, really, a lot of people also would prefer if you did email. I love this meme, Bernie Sanders saying, "I'm once again asking you to stop having meetings that should have been an email." And as it turns out, there are plenty of ways. Why is that article appearing twice there? There are plenty of ways that email is really challenging, maybe to you, but you probably prefer an email to an hour of someone reading you an agenda from a meeting itself. And so what I want you to think about today is the notion of balance. What can we do together in order to provide a better framework, right? How can we frame email in a way that can make it a better, more useful tool for everyone involved? Before I move into specifics today, I also want to note email is an incredibly useful tool for being a distance learning teacher, administrator, and student because of some reasons I'm going to talk about in a moment. But the word email doesn't appear that often in the national standards of quality for online teaching. And that's the specific set of standards I'm going to refer to here right now. But if you look more deeply, a lot of the standards that exist for online teaching can be met easily and without much drama utilizing an email platform. So for example, the professional responsibility standards in the NSQ talk about how the teacher to serve as an ambassador of knowledge to stakeholders. Pretty hard to do that if you don't have a one-to-one relationship with folks, and email is an outstanding way to do that. The online teacher demonstrates an understanding of effective time management strategies. Well, I got to tell you right now, if you're the teacher that's waiting 3 or 4 days to answer back a timely email, that is not demonstrating an understanding an effective time management strategy to your students. The online teacher models digital citizenship, same idea, not responding to emails or sending snotty or overly tonal emails. Is not digital citizenship. The online teacher maintains an accurate record of relevant information and communications in the appropriate format. Email does an outstanding job of that, whether or not our students like to sometimes admit that. More about that in a moment. Standard C about community building. Online teacher employs learner-centered instructional technologies and current practices to leverage technology for learner collaboration. Plenty of ways to collaborate in 2022. In fact, even more now than there were just 2.5 years ago. But as it turns out, the ubiquity of email, the universality of email, the everyone has an email address part of email makes it an outstanding tool to build community and to have prolific collaboration in your classes. Standard E about learner engagement, helping students with learner agency. Communication is critical for that. The teacher establishes relationships through timely encouraging communications using various formats. Email, in my mind, should be the core format for these types of things. The online teacher helps teachers reach content mastery through instruction and quality feedback using various formats. I think email is an outstanding way to do that. The online teacher ensures that learners have necessary course resources and information to navigate the course for learning. Best way to facilitate that, in my mind, is email. And the online teacher communicates frequently with stakeholders. And again, communication would be that as well. And finally, again, digital citizenship. The online teacher facilitates learning experiences that model and promote digital citizenship. And I've talked to countless instructors, really at all levels, K through higher education, that talk about the email load, but looking at it from the learner's perspective, not answering your emails or not answering your emails in a timely way, in my mind, is a really unfortunate situation when you're trying to engage learners and model what professional and useful communication looks like inside the online classroom. Okay. So before I get into my tips and tricks here to make this happen, first and foremost, here's my case for email. These are the 7 reasons why I think email is maybe one of the best e-learning tools ever created. First and foremost, it's universal. Nearly everyone has an email address. And my guess is if you work in any kind of distance or online learning, you have never, ever met a student that doesn't have an email address because chances are they picked up their username and password via email. And the universality of this, the fact that you don't have to adopt another platform, the fact that you don't need to create a new account for this, that you're likely coming to the party with an email address, makes it an incredibly useful everyone has tool that makes online learning and communication easier. Second, email is compliant, and especially if you work with K-12 learners, you know that there's been a lot of focus lately on shutting down district access to to communication tools that look or smell like social media because of the ongoing ugh that social media has brought to our society and culture, and because of what I consider to be a little overzealous but existing data privacy rules that mean that we have to utilize systems that are monitored by adults 24/7, and email is an easily compliant solution to make that happen. Next, email is simple. It's probably a little too simple, which is one of the reasons why it tends to lead to ugh tone, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the bottom line is that it's really easy to use, and there's a very low barrier to entry skill-wise. Email is archived, which means that if you have a conversation with someone, it's there forever if you keep it in your email box. And in fact, now that I have been with our organization since its beginning in 2010, I have literally hundreds of thousands of emails in an archive that I can go through and find information, maybe critical information from conversations that happened in 2013, for example. And I think that archive nature of it is awesome. Next, it's versatile. You can put an awful lot of things in an email, including links and images and other pieces of information. It's compatible across every single device. If you have a device on the internet, it can access email. And finally, perhaps the greatest advantage, in my humble opinion, to email is that it's asynchronous, which means that if your learners and you are not on the same schedule, email provides an extraordinary asynchronicity that means that you do not have to be at the same place and the same time to collaborate and communicate. It's been my experience over the last, and I taught online before I took this job, 15 or so years, that the mythology of the 2 a.m. student working on their class diligently at their time is really not that much of the reality. The vast majority of our students in Montana are accessing the program 8 to 5 Monday through Thursday, 8 to noon on Friday. They disappear then until Sunday night at about 6 p.m. So asynchronicity is not, and I keep making up that word, is not necessarily absolutely required, because in a lot of cases they may be working at the same time you are. But I do think that's something that we need to be very thoughtful about as we try to create opportunities for students to connect with you. If you don't want to be available at 9 o'clock on Friday night before an assignment is due, or you don't want to take a phone call at that time, email's pretty great. And let me dispel some excuses why people tend to say email is a bad tool. The first one is that kids don't use email. And I think there's two problems with this. The first one is that that's not universally true. And the reason why I know that is because I help run a help desk that is accessible via email, and students, when told, will email. They may prefer texting, although I think texting brings a whole other variety of issues that is worthy of another presentation. So I don't think it's true that students won't check or send email, because they do. But I'll also tell you this from a workforce development standpoint. My organization is engaged in a lot of conversations with industry about how to train folks for the next generation of jobs. Big conversation going on in the state of Montana. And the soft skills piece is something that we hear about from employers all the time. And I have employers that have told me things like, we provide our employees email addresses, and yet they want to text their manager at weird times at night. And they said it's not appropriate. It hurts work-life balance. And that information should be in an email, because that's the platform provided for professional communication. I think just saying the kids don't like email, so we're not going to use it, I think is a poor excuse for helping develop the next generation of workers. And email's not going away. It's been supposedly going away for 30 years, and yet it's still here. And whether we like it or not, certainly face-to-face schools run on email just as much as online schools do. The second piece is productivity. And I agree, there's too much email in this world. But usually when someone's sending you an email, it's because you have something to do with a task that they need critically completed. That's not I think too much is or that email itself is too much. You may have too much on your desk, but there are some things that I can give you tip wise in regards to the productivity. And then obviously there's a lot of spam in this world, and of course cyber threats. I've been in 3 meetings about this in the last 2 weeks. Obviously, lots of UG comes over email all the time, and the bottom line is you just need to be savvy to make sure that you stay safe. So, okay, here we go. Here's my best tips for making a better world by being more proactive about email. Before I get into specifics, though, 3 big things. The first one, be thoughtful about email. Don't just treat it as a de facto tool that you have to use despite you hating it. Instead, let's start to work together to make email less crappy, right? Like, I think any effort we put into this is going to make the environment better, but it's only going to get better if we're proactive with each other to make it happen. So that's the first big picture here. The second big picture is that you should be modeling good email strategy yourself, not only for your colleagues, but also your students. And if you start doing a better job in email, other people will start doing a better job in email. And I know that seems a little too simplistic, but it's been my experience for really a very long time that that's true. And then last, like, don't complain about email and then be part of the problem. Be the change that you want to see in your inbox. If you're not getting the emails that you want, or if your emails are causing undue stress or productivity then it's up to you to put out some good mojo in the email world and then see it circle around and come back. Okay, some specifics. Productivity, huge issue, mentioned several times in our brainstorming earlier. I'm going to start off with this tip, and I've got some resources to share with you later. The first one is that don't keep your email up in the background, right? Schedule the time you're going to work through email. And I think it's useful to actually schedule that on your calendar so that someone doesn't dump a meeting onto you when you need to be processing your email. For me, this is the first hour of the day. It's also the 4th or 5th hour of the day, and it's the last hour of the day. If I have time in the interim, I might check it to make sure there's not any hot lava emails sitting in my email. But I think it's really important to schedule your email time. And that's going to conflict with something I'm going to say in a moment. But I think all these things are and remain important balances. You should be checking your email. Your email shouldn't be checking you. So you need to control the time that you're doing it. One of the ways to do that is, for the love of all that's good, please turn off the notifications on your phone for email. And in fact, unless you absolutely need to access email on your phone, don't even have your work email on your personal phone. I get why some people do that, but there's no reason why your shoulder should be tapped every 30 seconds when you get an email. You need to choose that. You need to take control so that it's not interrupting you every 6 minutes. I think it's really important that you show email what time you want available to that, and then utilize that time by mass processing in a quick and savvy way. The next rule I have for productivity in email is use tools like text expansion and templates. And I have 2 tools that are amazing at helping you process your email. The first one is Text Expander. And I know, and I see some of the folks on there, shout out to all my friends in the presentation today. But some of you have seen this one for me already, but I'm a strong believer in text expansion, and I use Text Expander. I pay for this out of my own pocket. I love it so much. But over time, you're going to come up with phrases, more about that in a moment, that are better for email, right? That are better for you to be able to utilize, that don't fire people up or create inappropriate responses back. And as an example of this, I don't do as much direct emailing with parents anymore in my new role as the executive director at MTDA, but I did do a lot of parent interaction previous with my role as the assistant and curriculum director at MTDA. And over over time, I've come up with several phrases that I've utilized in parent emails, and I use a text expander, what's called a script for this. So if I type .pn and press the space bar, these are all email phrases that over time I've utilized and honed down and shined up so that I know what to say to a parent, so I'm not answering from the emotion of the email. And some of these are a little more formal and some of these are a little more informal, but stop recreating the wheel with every email that you get. And I do this across all sorts of email genres. For example, if I'm answering a ticket, I have a .tn, which stands for ticket nice. These are all the things that I might say in an email. And I'm going to talk about the formality of email in a moment and how important the formality is. But this is one of my tips or tricks for always using the most polite phrase. Pre-write these ahead of time. Don't get sucked into the emotion of these emails. If you really need to say, listen, that I really wish you'd contacted me earlier. That should come with an apology for the situation. I'm sorry, I wish you'd contacted me earlier to resolve this issue. Like, you should have been contacting me earlier, but I'm going to add some niceties to that so it doesn't fire people up. So text expansion is awesome. One other tool that I can't demonstrate here because I'd have to show you my active email, and there's stuff in my email, is something called Boomerang, which works, I think, for both Gmail and Outlook 365. It's also a pay-for service. I pay for it out of my own pocket. It's so important to me. Boomerang is great because not only can you press a button and have an email disappear for a week, right? Like, send this back to me in a week. You can also send an email and say, if no one replies back, remind me of this email in 2 days, right? Which means you can stay on top of your email without it being in your email box. And I think there are many great and wonderful tools that you might be able to utilize to help manage your email, but you have to find them and adopt them. But text expansion and Boomerang are awesome. The next tip here for productivity is the 3-reply rule. If you're getting involved in a sticky situation via email and tempers are flaring or it's getting in the muck, then stop emailing. Pick up a phone and call. And this has been the rule I followed probably 95% of the time over the last 6 or 7 years. Once we get to email number 3, I'm sorry, email's not the right thing anymore. It's just annoying people and not getting the job done. Pick up the phone and call, or change mechanisms, or set up a Zoom meeting, or step away from the email for a day or two if it's not that timely, and pick it back up when you could be more productive. Speaking of, I think the other email trick for excellent email presence is something referred to as inbox zero. And this thing has been a little maligned. It's been around for 15, 18 years now. I think it was Merlin Mann, who's a productivity expert, that was super into inbox zero. And I've actually seen articles saying that inbox zero is too high of an expectation. I disagree. I think if email is a critical part of your workflow, then you need to regularly process all your email and get rid of the stuff that's no longer relevant. That's the key part here. And if you're using Outlook or if you're using Gmail, it's really easy because you can just archive all of this, right? Get rid of, like, if it's an email that's just not important anymore, boomerang it to when it is, or archive it so you can just get rid of it out of your inbox. And I spend probably an hour or two every week going through emails, deleting, archiving, or boomeranging them so that they're out of my inbox so I don't miss things, or I'm not missing discussions that are critical. And inbox zero is super important. One of the ways that I also utilize inbox zero is something called the 2-minute rule, which I stole from a guy who I'm going to cite in a second. If you can answer the email in 2 minutes or less, just answer the email when you're reading it. Don't put it down the road. That's especially true if you can, if you are friends with someone, right? You don't have to add any niceties. You don't have to add any pleasantries. They're just asking what day the so-and-so is. Answer the email right then. Get it out of your mind. And by the way, I stole that from a really amazing author called David Allen. If you don't know David Allen, he wrote a great book 20 years ago called Getting Things Done. I'll admit, I don't have the wherewithal to do full getting things done. My brain doesn't work that way. I'd spend more time working on getting things done than actually getting things done. But there are so many great little hints, including the 2-minute rule from David Allen. I think that has to be a really critical reference if you want to kind of think about how to be more productive in your day. I also strongly recommend that if you don't need to use email, use a better tool for it, right? Just like the phone is important, if you're 3 emails in and nothing's getting done, we use Google Chat, which is a very Slack-like. If you've heard of the tool Slack at Montana Digital Academy, we have 18 folks that are in and out all day long as central office employees. And as it turns out, we have a lot of banality that we can just talk about on chat that doesn't need to be in an email. If email is not the right tool for the job, don't use email, and then email will be less because of that. Okay. The second set of tools has to do with your tone. And obviously there is an art to this, maybe more than a science, but I get that email fires people up. And my rule for this is you need to be exceedingly polite each and every time. And I wish that I were like this 100% of the time. It's probably close to 85% of the time, but you need to go out of your way, even if someone's being a total butthead to you, be exceedingly polite each and every time in email. And there's some subtle reasons why. First and foremost, if you haven't heard of this before, I really feel like it's guided most of the of the internet the last 25 years, especially the rise of social media and what social media has done to our culture and our elections. There is something called the online disinhibition effect, which is basically we have a disconnect here about what's coming out from our fingers when we're typing a tweet versus what we are really thinking or what we would originally say in person. And I'm 100% sure that all of you have experienced this either yourself as a poster or emailer, or you have experienced this in regards to receiving an UG email. The formality I know is going to feel super silly, but it brings a lot to the party because civility in email makes a really big difference, especially in professional conversations. I have picked up a lot of tips and hints by actually buying books about writing letters to people. I know letters, right? The stuff with the stamp and you lick the stamp, or I don't even think they lick anymore, and you send it off in the mail. These are 3 books that I've picked up some extraordinary phrases from: the How to Write a Letter, the How to Say It, the How to Write a Book. I have links to all these in my wakelet for this presentation, but you can adopt phrases that make things a lot better when you're trying to email people, right? So, and this spreads, right? The more you do this in your daily environment, the more people will do it back. I refer to students as Mr. or Miss in emails. I refer to parents very formally until we get to know each other. And I'm not going to call them by their first name until they call me by my first name. And I know that seems really dated and silly and way too formal, but I think email has such a potential to go off the rails tone-wise that this is the way we fix this. And a lot of my teachers picked up on this. We have a phrase internally called online smile, which you always need to use your online smile. I have some people that are terrible at it, but we've worked together to come up with some phrases they can use so that you're not firing off emotional emails to make things worse. And we are being civil to each other, which I think is something that's vastly lacking in 2022. The 3 reply rule also applies here, right? If it's getting out of control, put your thumb down and asking whether email is the right tool for the job. If you get a super fired up email and you're going to super fire up email back, well, that's not very useful. Schedule a call, schedule a Zoom. People are more civil. Someone mentioned earlier the lack of civility in comparison to like face-to-face and direct communication. Well, great. If email's not doing it for you, then don't use it, right? And that makes your email less when you are playing down the line with the end communications. Obviously, check your email for tone, right? There's an interesting way to do that. I'm going to skip this because we're running low on time. I use Grammarly. Again, another tool I love so much, I pay for it myself. Grammarly actually checks my tone, and this is my tone report from last week, that my tone was confident, appreciative, optimistic, friendly, formal, neutral, and informative. Although my confidence was down 4% last week, that checks. My optimism was down 1% last week, that also checks. But the bottom line is that that's a useful tool, and the free version, I believe, also checks tone. And then also bring a colleague in, right? We have a rule at the Digital Academy that if you're going to send a sticky email that has the potential of being a UG or draws a line for someone that's not looking for a line to be drawn, pull someone else in to help you with the tone, right? Whether you're a Microsoft school or a Google school, it's pretty easy to share a document nowadays on a screen to look at your email, even if you are remote and have no one sitting next to you. But I do not send a potentially hot button email out without having someone on my staff check it first, because tone is extremely important. And then last, someone mentioned this a little bit earlier as well. This is the wait until rule. Sweet mother of Troy, please don't answer an angry parent that sends you an email at 11:30 at night at 11:45 at night, right? There's just no reason to do that. You're not your best. Clearly, that email's not their best. And you have to question the motives of someone that's so fired up that they decide to open up their email at 11:30 at night to fire off some fire to you. So wait till tomorrow, or write your reply and don't press send and do it tomorrow. I think that's something that provides more civility in the world. It's also good for your mental health, right? Like, write the email so you can offload it off your brain for now, but don't press send until the next day, right? Or until you can pull someone else in, or until maybe the situation will fix itself. I'm not saying delay per se with the email. I'm just saying that if it doesn't need to be answered back right away, give it some time to marinate a bit in your head. One other piece about writing emails I think is important. You should write specialty emails super carefully, and I'll give you an example of this. I was reading some research the other day that suggested that no one reads more than 5 sentences in an email. It's like, well, that may be true, but sometimes you have to send out a pretty detailed email. So I'll give you an example of this. I know my teachers aren't going to read emails that are 13 pages long, but if I have some detail-oriented emails, then I'm always going to write them more or less like technical documentation than I am an email. That means highlighting important phrases. That means underlining important phrases, so that if someone's skimming an email, at least their eye will cross the important phrases, and that's what they'll take away from it, not just dismiss it as a mass. And I think careful and thoughtful writing of email is a really important part to making email, super duper less terrible. And finally, spread the good word. Email's only going to get fixed, right? If you join me in trying to make it better. And everyone that's saying that email's terrible, so I'm going to ignore it, they're just part of the problem. Or everyone that says that the kids won't use email without trying to set out breadcrumbs to make email better. Not only does that make all of our jobs harder, although I will give voice out to Jeff mentioned in comments earlier that there are great situations where texting is a better mechanism to deal with kids. He couldn't be more right? That's problematic depending, though, what your school is set up as. Is texting allowed? Some parents turned off texting to teachers. There's a variety of reasons, but yeah, these rules apply there too as well, right? Texting's a great medium, but also if you're just going to get in a fight on a text instead of an email, it's not doing you any good. First, spread the good word. And then also I would ask, set norms up in your office, right? We do that at the Montana Digital Academy, especially for our teachers, but it's even in our employee manuals about the importance of good customer service in email, and also being a good email writer and consumer. And then also teach this to kids, right? One of the things I'm absolutely convinced of is that distance learning is 10 times more effective when we're going out of our way to help students understand the environment, maybe even to a fault. And that's one of the things I love about the broader quality matters rubric and also the NSQ, is it acknowledges that most people come to us not ready to be great distance learners or teachers. So instead, you have to build skill sets there to ultimately make that happen. So keep that in mind as you're building this, but I think it's something we need to be really thoughtful about when we're working with students. Okay. I think we're done in 2 minutes. So I had planned this other grand Jamboard exercise, but I prattled on too long. So I'm going to go here. Again, my name is Jason Neiffer. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Digital Academy. I'm putting out my short link here, which goes to the Wakelet. It has all the articles I talked about today, plus all the tools that I'm citing. I'm also on Twitter at TechSavvyTeach. I love to connect with people there. I hope you have a great rest of your conference. We're done pretty soon here, I believe. Have a wonderful weekend. The weather is absolutely beautiful in Western Montana, and today is University of Montana homecoming. So go Grizz. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neiffer. I really learned a lot, and I feel like everybody else in the room did as well. The next up is our closing session, and so I just want to thank all of you. I'm going to stop the recording.